All right. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, you were saying that, like, based on the historical evidence, which religion is actually true. And I would argue that it really depends on what culture you're from. Because each culture, like in India, has historical evidence. The Vedas predate Christian thinking. So for them, there's a lot of historical evidence that their version is true. So why can't all of them have an element of truth and all of them have an element that says that is not accurate? Because what you're saying is that there's more evidence that Christian religion is correct. Okay? How much do you really know about Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism to base the idea that somehow our Western perspective is automatically correct? I'm assuming that you've grown up here, you've been told that it is correct, and the historical information you've been given is true. However, there's a lot of differences in historical interpretation. We have a King James Bible, then we have this Bible, then we have that Bible, so there's a lot of discrepancies in historical context. So I'm not saying that yours is necessarily wrong. I'm arguing that all of them can have an element of truth, that it's a psychological need to have spirituality, so there's not really a right or wrong answer.
So what I hear you saying is, Cliff, bottom line reason that you're a follower of Christ is because of your culture.
Well, that's right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. If I say to you, I believe that 2 + 2 = 4, is that cultural also?
Well, I mean, if you grew up in India right now, you'd be standing here arguing that Brahma is supreme.
Okay, just listen to what you just said to me. I don't see how you could believe what you just said to me. Cliff, if you had grown up in India, what you would be saying now is Brahman is the truth. Ma'am, how on earth do you know that?
I know lots of people from India.
Pardon?
I know lots of people from India.
Right, now, ma'am, I'm convinced you have articulated very clearly something that's very culturally accepted in our country today, which is, I believe what I believe because of my culture. And I would argue that's a genetic fallacy argument. I would argue that I don't think it has anything to do with my genes or anything with my culture. I think that I'm still a human being with a free will, with a mind. And I believe in Jesus Christ, not because mommy and daddy told me to, not because America told me to, but because I made a free decision of the will after looking at the evidence to trust in Jesus Christ.
But how objectively did you look at evidence in other countries before you say that your choice was better? That's all I'm saying. It's like before you decided of all of these options, this one is the best and has the most evidence. Did you really read historical context with the other religions? I mean, all I'm arguing, I'm not saying, well, your choice is wrong. I make my choice, you make your choice. But before I ever say, I don't like Islam, it's bad. Okay, or it's not true, there's no basis to it at all, I have to question myself and what makes me insecure about somebody else's beliefs.
And I would also plead with you to ask yourself, is not what I've stated out here self-refuting? Because what I've heard you say to me is, Cliff, your belief is simply the result of your culture. Are you not just laying your cultural bias now on me? I mean, are you sure that what you're saying is true? Or have you just been blinded by your culture?
I'm from the same culture as you. I'm from here. I'm not an international student.
You're contradicting me, which is fine, no problem. But notice the contradiction. No, notice what you're saying. You are so provincial, you're so limited by your culture that you've chosen to believe in Jesus. Would you be willing to say the same about yourself? That you are so provincial, so bounded by your culture that what you believe is simply culturally determined? Or are you telling me that you are so intellectually objective that you have separated yourself from your culture and you're having pity on this guy who is culturally blind?
Oh, I don't say no.
So what are you saying? Tell me honestly.
I did recognize before that my mindset is very, like, I raised going to church, and a lot of things kind of didn't make sense to me, so I started reaching out and just looking at other perspectives and saying, okay, what other truth is there? And I came to the conclusion that there's not one truth. There's one that I feel more comfortable with, or maybe a couple I feel more comfortable with, but there's not a single truth. So I did examine my cultural perspective, and then I made a choice on my religion because I realized it fulfills a psychological need for me as much as it does for everybody else. It's not whether one is true or another is untrue. I don't need somebody to be wrong for me to feel like my decision is correct. That's all.
Are you correct in that?
I certainly feel I'm right.
Okay. Now, is that truth that you're so wedded to, that all religions are simply a psychological crutch to help you deal with your insecurities? Are you absolutely convinced that that's true?
It's a very intellectual way of looking at it. It's part of the truth.
Yeah, but man, don't you see how
it
you are refuting yourself? Because what you're saying is, you're saying to me, Cliff, you hold to this truth, but really you're blind. Now, when you tell me that I'm blind, what you're doing is you're making an incredible truth claim. And your truth claim is, from my perspective, I see that all the religions that contradict each other are all essentially the same. And my perspective is true, and all these other people, be they Muslim, Christian, Jew, Hindu, are wrong. That's an amazing claim you're making.
Well, you're saying that they're not true based on historical evidence.
I guess for me,
And I'm
like
saying that historical evidence is relative. That it's been altered and changed by so many people, and it doesn't matter what country they're from. You know, Hinduism has changed. It predated Jesus. It's going to keep going, and as people modernize, we shift in our thinking of what is right and what's wrong. We throw things out of the Bible. You can't stone somebody to death for adultery anymore. Okay, so that was something that did exist that was altered. So to say one is right over the other based on historical evidence, I'm saying historical evidence has been altered and is therefore relative. And you will use historical evidence to support your decision.
Just like we just did.
Of course, but that doesn't make me right, nor does it make anybody else wrong. Just like it doesn't make you wrong.
Right. So for all you know, the Muslim militant terrorist might be correct. That's his perspective coming out of his culture, right?
His culture doesn't say that's right.
Oh, but that is absolutely wrong. There are definitely people groups that buy into jihad as being not just a spiritual jihad, but a physical jihad.
There's a lot of crazy people that are. I mean, the Ku Klux Klan.
And did the Crusaders say that the Bible was correct?
Yeah, right.
Oh, but we don't talk about that.
Right,
We talk about that? Absolutely we talk about
But
that.
you didn't. You went right. You pandered to the fears of the American people by bringing up Islam. That's why you chose the Islamic militant. You know it, and I know it.
And like the
You're
Ku
wrong.
Klux
You don't know. You don't know what's going on inside. I mean, that's the most judgmental statement that's been made out here today.
To be fair,
You don't know what's motivating me. I don't know what's motivating
I know
you.
what's
Okay?
motivating you.
You make some incredibly judgmental statements. You're amazing. So pull that one off.
Why did you bring up the Islamic militant example then? Of all the
Because it's the first one that came to mind. That's
Why was it the first one?
Because I live outside New York City, and I've been to Ground Zero many times with guys weeping over their dead friends. That's why emotionally it came to my mind. Okay, it has nothing to do with
It does pander.
bias against Muslims.
That
Right?
particular example may have
taking that
pandered, but I
social-
was here earlier when you mentioned the Hitler, Hitler's example. You mentioned that they used Christianity for the same purposes.
Right.
You mentioned I'm just saying
Religions
you
may
were
manipulate
objective about it.
it
You
to
did
back
give
up.
Of course I
examples
do.
that you just for his
Be it the
reference.
Salem
He
witch
did
trials.
mention that earlier. He
See,
did.
you gotta
He isn't
listen,
just
bud. You're not
pandering
thinking
about
with me.
Sorry, I was learning actual stuff in my class.
Well, then
Sorry
why are you
about
wasting
that.
your time out here?
Because it's not fair for someone like you to sit down here on your proverbial soapbox and just talk. It's stupid. It's ridiculous.
Oh, you mean these people are not intelligent enough to think for themselves?
You're saying they're not. You've made
Baloney, they're all intelligent enough to think for themselves. I've been an excellent. This guy's an atheist. I respect this guy highly. He has articulated very clearly why he's an
Earlier,
atheist.
he kept saying that people's thought processes were childish because they weren't going along the same lines of rationality he was. How quickly we forget that.
I have accused people of not thinking rationally at times. That's correct, and I'll stand by that.
Oh,
And I told
now
him
that's
he's an
contradicting
atheist,
what you just
but he has
said.
been very consistent with me, and I respect him highly. We obviously disagree very strongly, but he's been very reasonable with me.
It's all static cyberspace, information without a face. Give me an answer, don't waste my time, tell it to